Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco's here. You can check out the Inside the Birds guys Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. The podcast drops. You go to InsideTheBirds.com and read the fantastic insight and analysis from Andrew DiCecco. By the way, people are weighing in on this fantasy draft situation.
And what do they say?
I'll get to it.
Okay.
Let's bring Andrew in.
Keep
Eagles
weighing in.
And the Lions this Sunday. We're going to take a look at some of the matchups, how Andrew sees some of these matchups here. You know, last year this game was 44-6. How much are these rosters closer or further apart from the game last year? We'll break it all down. We'll get Andrew's thoughts on these rosters coming up right now on Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, the season is here. Football tonight. We got Eagles this weekend. Welcome back, my man. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, guys. How are you doing today?
All is good. Football tonight, Bills and Rams here on 97.3 ESPN. And obviously, Football at 4, we're taking a look at the Eagles and Lions. I want to get some thoughts from you. You know these two rosters so well. And number one, let's start with the Lions. This was a 44-6 game last year. The Eagles, that was the game that really turned their season around. They started to run the ball. They dominated up front. How much different is this Lions team than the one we saw? I think that was in Week 7 last year.
Well, they're vastly different, and especially in the trenches, I would say, but also they have a weapon in Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's a good volume guy, a chain mover guy that Jared Goff can rely on over the middle. Josh Reynolds is there. I think a healthy DeAndre Swift is going to make a world of a difference in the passing game, especially. But he's also an explosive home run hitter, so he's going to be there as well. Aiden Hutchinson, the first-round pick, of course. We're going to see what he's able to do. I mean, obviously, you don't want to set the expectations too high for what a first-round pick's going to do in his first NFL game, but you know they've added a lot of key pieces, and they have a lot of guys that are healthier now. But it's also coming off that Hard Knocks, which sort of casts a dark cloud over teams in the past. So we'll have to see how it goes. But I think the Lions they fight really hard for Dan Campbell, and they have a lot of guys that are healthy now. So I think it's going to be a little bit more. Far more competitive than that 44-6 outing that we saw on Halloween last year.
I want to look at the Eagles' defense first and kind of get your thoughts on up front, how you envision that front 3, 5, 4, whatever they do, how they affect this game this week. You just mentioned the Lions do have a pretty good offensive line. How do you see Philly's front in this matchup?
Well, I like the Eagles' front in virtually every game this season, and because they just have the ability to affect the offensive line in a multitude of ways. I mean, you have Fletcher Cox, you have Javon Hargrave, you have Milton Williams, who can play end tackle, Jordan Davis, who can be a run defending guy who's going to command a lot of attention. So, and we haven't even gotten to the ends, and Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham, and just their ability to just continuously apply pressure off the end and clean up from what those interior guys are going to be able to do. So I don't know if there's going to be any offensive line that's going to be flat out able to shut out this Eagles front. So I really like what they're going to be able to do. I think if there is a weak point in this line, I would look at Tommy Kramer, who was an undrafted free agent last season, who's going to be their right guard. That would be one area that I would look at. Other than that, you know, I think that it's going to be you're going to see the Lions' offensive line look a lot more formidable than it has in the past.
Andrew, it's Pete Thompson. Obviously, there's questions about Jonathan Gannon and what he can do now that he has allegedly all the pieces, and the linebacker position has changed a little bit. How do they change what Jonathan Gannon could do with this defense?
Yeah, and we talked about and I think I've tweeted this before. I'm going to be interested, Pete, to see what Jonathan Gannon's able to do now that he has the personnel to, you know, you would think presumably to execute what he's looking to do, what he envisioned doing when he took the job. Now, when I look at the linebacker position, you have Kaiser White and T.J. Edwards, who are going to be your two stack linebackers, and rightfully so. They've put together a strong summer, very consistent. T.J. Edwards, obviously, we've mentioned this before, and we all know it. He's more of a traditional rundown linebacker, but he has shown a little bit more growth and development in his game, a more well-rounded skill set, enough so that I think he can be a three-down linebacker, an effective one at that. Kaiser White is a player that is very rangy and has these skill sets that translate well to the current NFL landscape, in that he can flow sideline to sideline. He has good coverage acumen, smart player, flows to the football. So I think he can actually lead the Eagles in tackles this season. It wouldn't surprise me. But having those two guys that have two vastly different skill sets enables the Jonathan Gannon to deploy his coverage, to take more liberties in his coverages, and the defensive line's healthy and the rotation there. So I think ideally, in a perfect world, you're going to see a lot more of a cohesive unit on all three levels that are able to sort of complement one another, instead of having the defensive front have to mask all the deficiencies on the back end and at the second level. I think it's going to be a lot more complementary football.
And, of course, when we talk linebacker, the matchup issue is always, well, who's going to cover the tight end? Who covers T.J. Hawkinson, who's a pretty good tight end? Is that a linebacker, Andrew, or one of the safeties?
Well, that's a great question, Pete. And in this situation, since we're talking about T.J. Hawkinson, who is athletic, but we're not talking about the upper echelon of athleticism, I think that you can get by with Kaiser White handling that responsibility. I'm interested to see how they use Nakobe Dean, as a matter of fact, because we all initially thought that Davion Taylor was going to be that third linebacker and that coverage specialist, so to speak. But Nakobe Dean bumps up the depth chart a little bit, so he may end up shouldering some responsibilities in coverage. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Pete, would be a guy that I think would ordinarily shoulder a lot of these responsibilities going against some of the more premier talents at the position.
And he'll be vocal about it too, right? That's everything we hear. Him and Slay, talking.
Real quick on him, Andrew, do you have some concern this week that he might not be up to speed? Do teams take a kind of shots at him knowing that he might not have the terminology? And you get that one play where, like, wait, I was supposed to do what? Do you think that the Lions should take shots at Gardner-Johnson?
I think that they're going to try to, but, Mike, I think there's enough talent, surrounding talent on that defense, and the Lions aren't quite good enough to be able to even exploit any sort of shortcomings that he may have in the early goings here. I mean, he's a smart player by all accounts, so I don't know that there's going to be much there. I also think that they're going to be able to scheme around while he gets up to speed. I think they're going to be able to dumb it down for him a little bit. And there's enough playmakers, as we said, James Bradbury, Darius Slay, and Vontae Maddox, and the defensive front, that I think that it'll be able to sort of cover up for any sort of shortcomings that he may have.
Hey, Andrew DiCecco's with us. Check out InsideTheBirds.com, the Inside the Birds podcast, and the new Inside the Birds post-game show. You can get details on their website. They got a big post-game show that's happening this year after every Eagles game. And, Andrew, of course, football at 4. You mentioned St. Brown, who, by the way, on the last edition of Hard Knocks, apparently he's a big art fan. He was in the middle of the art studio. That was a pretty cool room that they were in. But would you say that he's their best receiving weapon? And if so, Slay and Bradbury. Slay had a big game there last year. He had the interception return for a touchdown. Would you really like the Eagles' ability in coverage against this wide receiving unit?
I like the Eagles' secondary versus the Lions' wide receivers, because the Lions don't really have an overly explosive weapon, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown is a volume-based receiver who has good short area quickness, is going to affect the short to intermediate areas of the field, but not someone that's certainly going to stretch them vertically or even threaten in that regard. And DJ Chark is another player, not necessarily known for his downfield speed. That's not an element of his game that I would worry about if I'm the Eagles. But Josh Reynolds is an all right player, but they just have a lot of guys that are solid football players, not game-breaking talent at that position. So I think what they're going to try to do is get guys like DeAndre Swift involved in the passing game, T.J. Hawkins over the middle. So you're going to see Kaiser White and the linebacker rotation, in my opinion, that's going to be put to the test early to see how they're able to defend that short area of the field.
Yeah, and you bring up DeAndre Swift, who, by the way, was a very popular player in our fantasy draft last night, but that's not important right now. The Lions finally have a very good running back for the first time since maybe Barry Sanders. How concerned should Gannon and the Eagles D be with DeAndre Swift? How much of a problem is he for that Eagles defense?
Well, he can pose as a headache, Pete, for any team if he's healthy and firing on all cylinders, which by all accounts they're trying to manage his workload and do things right, as I understand, to make sure that he's available for. I think he's only been available for 26 total games in his career. He's 13-13 his first 2 seasons, but he's their lone home run hitter that they have, and outside of T.J. Hawkinson, who's he's more of a safety blanket red zone option. I think DeAndre Swift, the offense is going to go through him. They have a good complement of Thunder and Lightning and Jamal Williams as well, but DeAndre Swift, in theory, is their do-it-all running back. I don't know that he's going to be a volume-based runner, but he's going to be their focal point, I have to imagine, because they don't have a whole lot of firepower to work with as far as the wide receivers go.
All right, Andrew, let's go to the Eagles offense because it's got a big difference maker now that they didn't have last year, and yet they scored 44 points in this game. They did it by primarily running the ball. I want to ask you, what's the best way for the Eagles offense against this Lions team? Stick with the ground game, or do you want to see them get A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, Devonta Smith, and Quez Watkins involved in week number 1 here?
Yeah, I think that the plan of attack should be to start with working the intermediate areas of the field with Dallas Goedert. I think that there's an opportunity there to exploit a guy like an Alex Anzalone who isn't overly explosive or fluid or rangy, and he struggled in the past. Remember, he used to be with the Saints, and he had some issues there defending the middle of the field. So I think that there's some good opportunity there to kind of get Jalen Hurts in the flow of the game, get some short dump-offs to Dallas Goedert, and then open things up. But the Lions are decent on the outside, right? They have Jeffrey Okudah, formerly of Ohio State, first-round pick. And they have Amani Oruwariye. He's very physical. He's a very raw player when he came out of Penn State, but he's physical and he's on the outside as well. So I'll be interested to see how he's able to, challenge a guy like a Devonta Smith and get up on him at the line of scrimmage. I think a guy who's going to have an opportunity to thrive here in this game and be sort of an unsung hero and is being overlooked is Quez Watkins, who should see a lot of Mike Hughes, the corner, as he lines up in the slot, and I think he can test him vertically. So that would be a player. I would look at Quez Watkins and Dallas Goedert to factor into the equation, and I have to think that I have a weird feeling that you're going to see a lot of Boston Scott this week, just given the workload and that Miles Sanders is the limited workload of Miles Sanders, and I don't know if they want to overload him right away. And Boston Scott can handle that in the intermediate future. So he's not a bell cow running back, but I think that I think they have a lot of confidence in what he's able to do versus a Kenny Gainwell. Just look at the preseason as far as the snap shares go. Boston Scott got the carries first, and Gainwell was still playing while into the second quarter. So
yeah. By the way, Scott had 2 touchdowns. Scott had 2 touchdowns in the game against them last year.
You talked about that's where their season changed, where they started to embrace
they ran for
run.
4 touchdowns in that game, guys.
Yeah.
They ran for 4. Scott had 2
right.
in that one.
So I want to know, Andrew, which Eagles player do you think is set up to have the best week of these choices? A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders.
Ooh. Spicy, PT.
That's a great. I like that question. I'm going to say Dallas Goedert, and the fact that the quarterback is most comfortable throwing to him. That's how he's going to settle into the game. So I think he's going to get peppered with targets early, and that's the area to exploit when you're looking at the Lions defense as a whole. I would attack the middle of the field. Goddard is such an explosive weapon, and they're going to build off that chemistry from last year. So I think that just the familiarity, Pete, and his body type and just his overall skill set really lends itself favorably to what Jalen Hurts is going to have to get into the flow of the game and in that rhythm. So I think you're going to see him get involved early.
Andrew, real quick, because you look at the offensive line. Stoutland today mentioned that Landon Dickerson is by far the most improved guy. And I want to kind of get you, because you know these college guys really well and what you thought of him coming out of college. And then what he did last year at left guard. If he's exponentially better, what kind of left side with him and Mailata, what can that side of the line really do with this for this team?
It unlocks the full potential of the offense if they are, sort of hitting the ground running early and really coming into form, rounding into form, I should say. Landon Dickerson is a player who I saw ascend throughout last season. I saw him continuously improve and get better. He got more confident. His hand placement was better. His balance was better. He just was playing with a lot more confidence throughout the season. And I think that just comes with reps, right? And I think that the talent was undeniable. And I think it was just getting out there and proving that you could, produce at this level, and just going out there and executing. He got more comfortable, and you started to see Jordan Mailata's been fantastic. So that left side of the line is going to be a strong point for the Eagles and a point of emphasis. I think that a lot of the play designs and things of that nature should be crafted and architected to kind of take advantage of that.
By the way, no Frank Ragnow at practice for the Lions today. Vaitai also out for them, so they could be down their center, who might be the best player on their team, and their right guard. And you take a look at what the Eagles could do up the middle there. This could be our first opportunity to really see what kind of impact Jordan Davis could have in a game if they're down to their second guard and center in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're going to see Jordan Davis, and he's just a pocket pusher, right? There's going to be plenty of games where you're not going to necessarily see the impact on the stat sheet. But when you look at what he's able to do from an on-field perspective and open things up for everyone else and occupy double teams and really just collapse the pocket and get quarterbacks rattled and uncomfortable and off their mark, that's invaluable. And you get guys that are able to clean up like your Derek Barnett, not Derek Barnett, he won't be starting, but you're going to be getting your Josh Sweats and Brandon Grahams. And Derek Barnett's going to see some snaps, and all these guys are going to be beneficiaries of Jordan Davis and what he's able to do from a skill set standpoint. So, and that's going to be the area that they're going to be really able to exploit, that middle of the line. And they have that's arguably the strongest point of the team outside offensive line, so you have to like their chances there.
Couple things, Andrew. I know that I've heard Gil talk throughout the week that this is a sellout for the Lions. It's the first time that they've sold out a game. Maybe that's the Hard Knock effect, who knows, but it's a sellout for them in Detroit. And then the second thing is, I always like that phrase, path to victory. Do you see any path to victory for the Lions?
It's really hard to see, and I agree with you. I think the Hard Knocks factor is very much a real thing, and you start to, if you're a Detroit fan, you start to buy into the hype because, that's what Hard Knocks does. It gets you excited for the season and has people that, buy in. But I think that it's going to be very difficult for the Lions to win, even at home, even just given the situation and their advantages. I think it's going to be really hard for them to overcome just the sheer firepower that Philadelphia has on offense, and Philadelphia is stronger in the trenches than most teams, and that's really where the game is won. So I really don't know how they're going to be able to do this. Their path would be to try and get DeAndre Swift going and get a couple explosive plays and try to flip the game and flip the script like that and get momentum on their side. But I just don't think that that's going to happen. Philadelphia is faster, more physical, and they're going to execute at a higher level, regardless of how much they like Dan Campbell and how much they want to rally behind him and really perform for him. I just don't think that they're in the same class as Philadelphia right now.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, InsideTheBirds.com, the Inside the Birds podcast, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. Adam will be here tomorrow, Andrew on Thursdays, and he gives you that kind of breakdown with each week's Eagles matchup, and you can read him at InsideTheBirds.com. And at A DiCecco NFL, make sure you follow him for all the Eagles insight for this season as we are back to Eagles football here on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, always appreciate it, buddy.
Absolutely, guys. Take care. Have a good one.